everyone. Welcome to the AbleNet webinar. And I want to thank you all for joining in this webinar. Together we are going to embark on a literacy journey to provide invigorative instruction to learners with significant needs, learners with severe and multiple disabilities. Again, let me thank AbleNet for enabling this webinar to happen. What are we going to be looking at in this 1 hour? We are going to look at how we are going to incorporate the Universal Design for Learning guidelines, the framework to design literacy activities, but much more important than that, it is how are we going to use these guidelines in planning our activities and to engage our learners. One of the concerns that I have always had, having worked in this area, consulting for school districts and writing books, is often students with severe disabilities, severe and multiple disabilities, most significant cognitive disabilities, do not readily engage, and what happens is they become more passive watchers of instruction rather than active participants, so therefore it impacts their outcomes. So we are going to be looking at a variety of tools and techniques that we can incorporate in order to make that instruction invigorative for the learners and create a vibrant learning environment. At the end of this session, I hope you will be able to walk away with a lot of tools and how to adjust the task complexity level so that your students will be active participants. And I'm also going to share with you a kind of number of technology tools, both mainstream and assistive technology, some of the tools that are available from AbleNet in order to increase student participation. Those of you who have come to these webinars who have participated know about me. I am an author and an educational consultant. The two or three areas that I specialize in is the severe and multiple disabilities, autism, and early childhood education. And the book that you see on the green, the Guide to Strategies for Successful Learning, Serving Students with Severe and Multiple Disabilities, I just want to mention that it's packed with tools, both in terms of instruction, because it offers 34 different instructional organizers addressing a variety of content areas as well as personal life skills. And it provides lots and lots of monitoring tools, communication tools, best practice tools, and a lot of adaptations with illustrations so that you can readily use it to implement, to plan and implement your instruction. And this particular book happens to be published by LRP Publications, and it is listed in the resource. This is another tool that you can use. I mean, this is a tool that I have developed, but you can create your own, or you can get it from this special needs toys. And it is the curriculum toolkit, and maybe at a future time I can even do something about explaining how you can put together adapted books and adapted tools in order to engage the learner more actively. As a first step, it is important for us to understand what are the learner's characteristics or learner's needs, and also at the same time, what are some strengths that we can capitalize on? How can we discover the hidden potential in every student? Usually students with severe and multiple disabilities, they may have communication and cognitive difficulties. Their communication could be at the beginning symbolic level, which would mean they are using vocalization, they may be using pointing, they may be using eye gaze, they may be using body movement, and with the whole body they might try to reach. And we have to make adaptations that will take advantage of the way the student communicates. Or the student may be at the early symbolic level, which means they may be using both pictures and objects combination. They may have some limited vocabulary, limited spoken words, and how do we take advantage of that? And then you may have students who have severe and multiple disabilities but may have symbolic communication, which means they have some speech with a large vocabulary set to communicate their thoughts, feelings, and needs. And they may also use pictures, and they may use an advanced technology to communicate with others and communicate their needs, thoughts, and feelings. So the other issue that we may face with students with significant needs is they may have difficulty generalizing the concept learned in one setting and then transfer it to another setting. Like, for example, they may be able to read a certain word, but when it comes to looking at the menu in the cafeteria, they may have difficulty transferring the same word and reading that word. Or if they are going on a community-based instruction, to apply that. So we have to make sure that we have opportunities for them to generalize. And with students with severe and profound cognitive impairment, you may find that they have difficulty even separating themselves from the environment and understanding who they are and what they can do. And along with this goes decreased attention span and a high degree of distractibility. And we can, as educators, gradually build that attention span through motivating activities, through multisensory approach. So the other issues that they may have, they may exhibit some self-stimulatory behaviors, they may have visual auditory problems, and some of the tools that I'm going to share with are helpful for students who are visually impaired or blind. And then they may also have physical issues, physical mobility issues, and they may be using a wheelchair to ambulate. And then additionally, it is possible that they have medical issues which also impact their attention, their performance, their ability to focus on a task. So let us look at this instructional framework. One of the things that we want to be able to do is we have to be able to begin with the end in mind. Where do I want my student to be at the end of this year? Maybe at the end of 3 years, maybe at the end of 5 years. So we have to begin with that clear goal in mind. And then how am I going to enable the student to actively participate so that the student at the end of 3 years, end of 5 years, or at the end of school will be less dependent on others and much more dependent on himself and be able to take care of some of his needs and establish a greater control over the environment. That's the most important goal in enabling students with severe and multiple disabilities. And we want the students to gain at the end of every week, every day, every month, at the end of every year. How are we going to do that so that we are not using the same IEP goals year after year? Of course, as we already began, we have to understand their strengths and needs. And then we have to make sure we create student-specific supports and adaptations. And then we have to make sure we have a combination of academic curriculum activities and functional curriculum activities. We have to have a good blend of that. We can use academic activities but make it functional. And then we have to be monitoring their progress and then go back and change our techniques if the student is not moving forward. So as we apply that framework, what are some essentials that we need to have in implementing our framework? How do we make sure that our students access and attain academic and functional outcomes? First and foremost, as I mentioned, we are going to increase our knowledge of universal design for learning and be able to use that to increase access to learning. And that's one of the major problems many students with severe and multiple disabilities face, the access to learning. Because the task is too complex, or the concept is too complex, or there are not sufficient adaptations to enable them. So we're going to look at that. And then the concept that's very minimally used, I find, is partial participation. The student may not be able to do all of the steps in the task, but maybe partially participate. And then we have to look at our instruction and see, is it engaging? Is it interactive? Are we using multisensory approach? Are we using concrete items? And then next we move on to technology. Are we using technology effectively to enable that learner to participate, both mainstream technology and assistive technology to increase participation? And my own particular interest is in making sure that in addition to all of these things, we also want to make sure that the activities are age appropriate. And the materials that we used are age appropriate for the student we are serving. So beginning with the universal design for learning guidelines, when we are presenting materials, presenting a concept, presenting a lesson, we have to make sure we present it in a variety of formats. We adjust the level of complexity. If we take a fiction book, and the fiction book has 100 pages or 120 pages, can we make it into an adapted summary of that book and present it in terms of 6 or 7 slides and use that to share with a high school student, let's say To Kill a Mockingbird or Gulliver's Travels, for example? Or we providing different flexible and multiple methods for the student to be able to express and share what he has learned? Are we using multiple ways for the student to respond? The next step on this one is, are we providing flexible options for engagement? Are we using the student's interest to kind of design some of the activities? Are we providing appropriate challenges, but at the same time, are we increasing the motivation level of the student and building the attention, focus, and the self-control to focus attention? That way we are also building executive function skills. It may not all happen in the first lesson or in the first 10 lessons. It may be a long journey. However, we can do it if we are persistent and if we make our activities flexible with using the UDL guidelines. So what is partial participation? How does it work for students with severe and multiple disabilities? As I mentioned before, they may be able to do several steps. They may be able to do one step in a task. For example, if the activity is, let's say, reading, and the student's participation in the initial stages is not throwing the book on the floor, but is tolerating, or she is tolerating touching and feeling the book, or locating or eye-gazing an object that's attached to the book, or a picture or a foam picture that's attached to the book. Let's say you have the story of Gulliver's Travels, you're presenting to a high school student, and you have a foam picture or a photograph of a ship, or even a small miniature boat or a ship, and you are attaching it to the page with Gulliver's going on a voyage, then that is increasing the student's understanding and the it also enables the student to make the connection between the concept of a ship and the object and increase. And the student is able to remove that with a Velcro attached and participating, then you are increasing the student's tolerance to the activity, and gradually you will increase attention and focus too. And gradually the student will be able to complete 2 or 3 steps independently. So what are some other things we need to be looking at? We want to increase access to the curriculum. We have to customize the adaptations depending on the individual student need. Usually it may vary from student to student. And we have to look at, as I said, look at the communication levels of the student. Is it beginning symbolic? Is it early symbolic? Or is it symbolic level? And then we may have to look at the behavior issues and provide personal intervention. Is the student kind of tending to push the object away from his desk or from the work area? Is there some way we can have a tray and Velcro the objects inside that tray, and the tray itself is Velcroed to the table? And are we providing prompting? And is the prompting effective, or are we providing over-prompting by completely hand-over hand prompting? And is there an adult support? And is the adult support intrusive, or is the adult able to withdraw and enable the student to work as much on his own as possible? And then one of the natural supports that is available in many settings, both in maybe in an inclusion classroom and also in a self-contained setting, is there are going to be other students who are able to help and provide natural support to the student with severe and multiple disabilities. Let's take advantage of all of that. And we are looking at an adaptation hierarchy. We always have to move from the least amount of adaptation, and then gradually, if it doesn't work, increase the adaptation level. So we have to look at, for example, how can we adapt the environment? How do we adjust the student's positioning? How do we provide the student an opportunity to look at the materials? If he is not able to look down at something, can we place the book on a slant board? Can we place objects on a mini whiteboard that the student can use? Can we use some special technology, special adaptation, special? Can we adapt the materials, which we briefly talked about? Can we use PowerPoint presentations? Can we use technology support? Can we adapt the activity requirement, what the student has to do? I will give you an example here. In other words, let's say we are looking at vocabulary, and let's say the para-educator or the teacher is working on some vocabulary words, and instead of using all the 24 words that we are working with the other students, can the student with severe and multiple disabilities have just 4 words, and they are going over the 4 words, and every other 5 or 6 students take their turn, and then my student with severe and multiple disabilities takes a turn, and he is working or she is working on those 4 words, and we can attach either a photograph or an object to those cards. That is adapting the activity requirement. And as I mentioned before, we can use peer support and adult support in addition to that as necessary. This one that you're looking at is an instructional organizer. So as you plan your instruction, this is not something you do in one day's lesson. You can have multiple activities associated with a specific concept that you are teaching. Let's say you're teaching comprehension, or you're focusing on comprehension and expanding vocabulary skills, or you're focusing on, let's say, conflict in a story, and you are teaching that to increase the literacy understanding of your student. Then you are going to use a variety of activities and variety of tools, and you have this kind of an organizer. So how are you going to combine? First, you're going to note down what are the areas that you're going to address, what are the functional skill areas? How are you going to blend the two together? And what kind of a setting is it? Is it a self-contained setting? Is it a high school or elementary? And what are some specific learning objectives that will be addressed through these activities and through these lessons? And what materials would you need? What adapted materials would you need? What technology would you need? Are you going to what kind of a communication device? So if you plan all these things ahead of time, and I'm not talking about one lesson that's done in one day, but you repeat that lesson, because students with severe and multiple disabilities need a lot of repetition. Only thing is you may use different materials, maybe slightly different materials, but the supports would be the same. And how are you going to achieve that? What are the steps involved? So think about all these adaptations and support tools, and then what progress monitoring tool. I do have to mention at this point that you will find in my book, Serving Students with Severe and Multiple Disabilities, all these instructional organizers with already a number of activities, as I said, 34 organizers plus cluster supports with all kinds of adaptations and illustrations of adaptations. So you are working now. How are we going to make this instruction really engaging and invigorative for the student? First step you take, as I mentioned before, you are taking, let's say, the story of the giving tree. You are taking the story of the Charlotte's Web, let's say the famous stories, or To Kill a Mockingbird, or Gulliver's Travels at the high school level. Can you use these stories and adapt the text, and you simplify them and provide a short summary? One of the things that you would do at this point is, when you have created that summary, you would just have a picture on a page and make it into and then maybe one or two sentences about that picture that relates to the story, and then you make it into a PowerPoint presentation. Then you print out the slides, and you can either hole punches and put a ring around it, or you can staple it, and each student can have a book. I'm talking about a book that's no more than 7 or 8 pages, or even less for younger children, and it's a PowerPoint presentation. You can first present it as a PowerPoint presentation, and the next time or the third time around, the student can follow that, looking at the PowerPoint slide and then looking at the book, and maybe you attach one object and the student touches that object. And then you can use graphic organizers, you can use storyboards, and I'm going to show you illustrations later on in this presentation of all of these things. You can use video clips, very short video clips, no more than a minute or 3 for this population. And you can use multimedia you can use a variety of tools. Make it motivating, make it engaging, and then make sure that you integrate technology into the lesson and have communication aids for the student to be able to participate. This is, for example, the giving story, and most of you may be familiar with this one. As a matter of fact, there is a Story Maker app that's provided in the slide that you can use to create stories. As I mentioned, you can make it into a PowerPoint slide, PowerPoint presentation, and you can program it with a bookworm that's available from AbleNet with the adapted story, so that after the story and the activity is done, and the student can go in during a later time during the day and hear the story, or a peer can help the student to proceed from page to page and listen to the story. This is a graphic organizer that you can use, and I'm going to show you later on how you can attach objects, or you can attach photographs. By the way, the line drawings we tend to use very heavily, the board maker pictures, tend to be very abstract, and for students with severe and multiple disabilities, they will benefit from concrete objects or maybe some photographs. This is a word wall that you can create using real objects if necessary, or at least photographs. And what I would suggest is these are all the words that are linked to, for example, the giving tray, which is appropriate, very much appropriate at the elementary level. One of the things that I would recommend as you are preparing this word bowl, let the students, involve the student, and don't do too many words at the same time, and use minimal number of words and go out. Let them go and pick some leaves and bring the real leaves, and then put them in maybe a little Ziploc bag and attach it your word wall, and you pair it with the text leaves. And similarly, the students can help to create that happy face, and that's a foam shape attached to a craft stick. And you can similarly put an apple in a Ziploc bag and attach it. And students, they touch and name the object. As they name the object, if they can use a talking bricks communicator. The talking bricks communicator that you see at the upper right-hand corner, these bricks, you can separate them. They are available from AbleNet. They can be separated, and you can program one vocabulary word. And so as they press it, they hear the word, they see the object, and they see the text. So, and you can also kind of attach it to a mini whiteboard, and you can attach the object and the text next to it, if a student needs that kind of support. The most important steps as you're making these adaptations is you have to make sure students get familiar with the materials. One of the things that I would like to mention here is sometimes we overwhelm the student. So we have to make sure we present limited amount of vocabulary. We adapt the concept in such a way that we are not presenting a lot of materials at the same time. We familiarize the student with a number of things, but those number of things are limited to maybe 3 or 4 items, and then we gradually add one by one. And then we have to make sure that the student is positioned. I would like to make one point here that sometimes when the student is positioned in a stander, we think that's a time that the student cannot participate. No, the student can participate still while he is in a stander. That is not the time for the student to just while away or the student to be not engaged. We can certainly place some kind of a mini board or give the student, or the student can watch the PowerPoint. You can place the book that you have created on a mini board, on a slant board, and the student can engage with the activity. And stabilizing the material is also very important, particularly for students who have difficulty controlling their hand grip. It is important to stabilize the materials. You may have to attach it with Velcro. For younger children, for example, you want to make sure you place it either on some kind of a material that will adhere to the table surface. And you can also use for example, something as simple as a shelf liner and kind of press it on the table and then place the objects so that the student is not constantly struggling and it is not moving away from that place. You can also place objects on the mini board, as I said, and you can attach it with Velcro. The other one is using an adaptive grip. For example, some students have difficulty holding object and they may not have the pincer grasp. So what you can do, for example, you can use an adapted glove and put some Velcro on it, and similarly Velcro on the object or the picture, and you can attach it to their adapted glove. Or you can use a Velcroed wristband, which will also serve the same purpose, and these are things that you can use for someone with limited motor control. And as much as possible, provide tactile, visual, and verbal supports, all in combination, in order to increase the concept understanding as well as to get that touch and feel and the multisensory. Here, for example, this is a comprehension tool, and it will help both build comprehension skills as well as expand their vocabulary. And the concept that you're addressing is to gain basic understanding of literary text. You can use it, but I wouldn't present the main theme, the characters, the events, and the conflict in the story in the same lesson. You would focus on the events in one lesson or for a whole week. You would present the conflict in the story maybe for a couple of weeks. You would focus on the theme. Let's say you're doing this particular story, which is the giving tree. You would focus on the friendship or the tree's giving to the boy, and the boy asking, but the tree is very giving and generous. And then these pictures that you see are foam cutouts, and they are attached with Velcro. And when you are talking about the characters, and you can put those that are linked to the story along with a distractor that's not linked to the story, and the student can make a choice. Or if the student has very significant, most significant cognitive impairment, then you may want to give him the one choice, and first he learns to attach that character or that photograph to the board, to the storyboard. So it depends on the student's level, but these are all some adaptations that you can use in order to increase the student's participation. Here is another example. This one is the story of Charlotte's Web. Again, you would involve the student as much as possible in actively engaging with the story, in placing the characters in the story, and what is the story's theme, the friendship between Charlotte the spider and Wilbur the pig, and where did the story take place. And you can certainly use mini toys, concrete items, photographs, and these kind of foam cutouts. And what you see also there is a kind of a character stamp. Actually, this particular one is made with a foam canister top, and then you see that picture at the top, and the student can use it as a tool for his writing activity. He can dip that into an ink pad, and then you can provide the student with a sentence strip, or you can provide the student with a template that says one of the characters in the story of Charlotte's Web is Wilbur the pig. And for the word pig, the student can stamp that, and that way you are reading as you are reading, or you have it programmed into a Big Mac or one of those other devices. You can combine it with text, a voice for the student, as well as a tool. And this particular tool, the adapted character stamp, you can also use it with an adapted glove, and you can attach Velcro at the bottom of this tool and similar corresponding Velcro on the glove, and the student can just stamp it even if he doesn't have the pincer grasp. And this is an adapted book page. This is one where you are actually attaching, you don't have to attach that many apples. I'm just showing as an illustration, and you can just have one page and they're making the connection. So this is the tree, and they have gone outside and they have touched a tree, and now they have the concept of the tree. You come back in and you show them the slide, and then they have the book page which has the slide PowerPoint page printed out, and then they are touching either the photograph and matching it with the corresponding apple in a Ziploc bag, or you attach actually maybe mini apples on that page, and the student is now making the connection. Oh, this is an apple, and the apple grows in the tree, and I went outside and saw that tree. So these are trees, and trees give apples. And now next you can say the tree gave apples to the boy, and then they can make the connection, and that would be your next page in that adapted book page. And so how do we get the student? You saw one example in the previous page where you had the student touch the apple. So that is active engagement. What are some other ways? For a student, we can get them to respond to yes, no, with the yes, no. So these are called response participation cards. They may say yes, no, or they say yes, I like it, I don't like it, or they can say yes, I'm happy about it, I am not happy about it, this story makes me happy, this story makes me sad, and you can pair it with an assistive technology device called the iTalk2 communicator with the red and the yellow button, and you can post these signs, the text on that, the yes and no, and build the student's understanding of making that choice, along with using maybe response participation cards, which you can use for a student slightly at a higher functioning level. The other adaptation, as I mentioned previously, is a sentence strip to present information in a writing activity, and the student's task may be just to place a picture to complete that sentence. You can also create a collage or a drawing on a topic. For example, that would be perfect for the story with the giving tree. The student can communicate about the story by pointing to the objects, pointing to pictures. The student can respond with eye gaze at the object. And those objects could be attached to a mini board or activate a switch with that picture on it. The student can manipulate the objects attached to a word wall that we talked about previously. Or the objects could be attached to a timeline so that it shows sequencing, and that would be a skill that you'd also be teaching, a sequencing, and you can combine it with sequencing of activities during the day. And the response participation cards, I mentioned about it, the yes-no cards paired with photos. One of the most important things I want to mention here is a boy-girl cards with pictures of a boy or a photo of a boy and a girl, and particularly this is needed outside of the restroom, so that the student places that, velcros it as he is taken in there or he goes in, so that it increases their understanding that I'm going into the restroom, I am a girl or I'm a boy. Similarly, the like-dislike cards, and I'm going to show you an example the next slide. Happy, sad cards to express personal feelings. And this is how you can make it. And these cards or photographs or pictures, or you can even use line drawing maybe for this if the student is at that level. And these are comprehension tools, and these are attached Velcro to craft stick. And if the student has difficulty, you can either insert it. If they have a closed fist, you can insert it in their hands, and they can choose by either pressing on it, or it can be attached to an adapted glove. And this is what I was talking about earlier, the I Talk to a Communicator. And this can be used to increase their communication, increase student engagement and participation. They can choose between 2 activities, 2 food choices when they are going in, and you can put that food choice. Do you want a sandwich or do you want a hamburger? And you can use it when you are going on a community trip and they have to choose between 2 meals, 2 choices there. They can make an yes or no response. They can make an like, no, like, dislike, or they can make between 2 picture choices that are related to a story, or on 2 object choices that are related to a story. And the picture that you see there, the assistive technology tool, that's a bookworm, and you can program an entire book in this bookworm, and it can be made available to the student at a later time after you've gone through the PowerPoint presentation and the student has looked at the adapted book, and the student can listen to the story, and the peer can program the story, read it into the bookworm, and it will become an accessible tool, and the student can access it through a switch. And by the way, the proximity sensors that are available from AbleNet, that it's called, I think, Quick Talker 1, can be used to access many of these tools. If the student is not able to press a device, the proximity sensor device, the Quick Talker, they can just wave their hand and activate it. And this is instruction in writing, and the students write a story about trees, let's say, and the students place an object or a photo in the bank that you are giving them, a word bank that you see there, and the students complete that story. And maybe for a student with the most significant disability, severe disability, maybe the object bank instead of the pictures. And then the student eye gazes it or touches it or waves it so that the student indicates his response, and then maybe somebody else helps the student to place the object in that blank. We want to make sure that hand over hand, this kind of a help is minimal, and as much as possible we want to make sure that the student makes the choice and the student engages in the activity. Writing, as I mentioned before, the Quick Talker that you see on the right, that's the Quick Talker 7. It's a communication device, and maybe you can place the words from the story, the vocabulary words, paired with the word wall into that Quick Talker, and the student can practice it. And during your vocabulary practice, the student can maybe press the device to participate. Or the student may use just one word the trees give, and you can give a choice, do they give money or apples? And the student chooses and uses the I Talk to Communicator. And we are moving on to the secondary level. Let's say I'm just going to touch on this just briefly, because I want to have time to answer your questions. But frequently at the secondary level, the age-appropriate activities become quite a puzzle and a complex issue. That's why I want to mention how we can use even role play, drama, and literary text that is adapted for the secondary level. And again, we are building on their comprehension and vocabulary skills. We are increasing their interaction and engagement. And we are trying to link their literacy to their personal life experiences. And we are also including the writing process. I have two choices here that I'm going to share with you. One is The Wonderful World of Oz, and the other one is To Kill a Mockingbird by Lee. And by the way, the one that I'm mentioning there, Kids Inco, it offers a variety of play scripts. You may have to slightly adapt it, but still it has a complete list of play scripts, and The Wonderful World of Oz is available there. So you can use it for your own purpose and maybe slightly adapt it for your students. And what are some objectives, learning objectives that you will incorporate? Let's say it'll be as simple as identifying two characters in the drama. Given choices, with maybe in the beginning both choices are the correct choices that belong in the story or in the drama, and then moving on to adding a distractor. Identifying the drama elements. What is the setting, the characters, events, props that you need for that? And one of the things that we seldom use with our students with severe and multiple disabilities is role play and simulation. And if they are paired with a communication device and they have to play it, and it will increase their excitement and motivation when they are participating in role play. And they are using, composing a story summary, but they are filling in sentences using a word bank. And then they are composing thoughts to create a self-portrait. In other words, they are telling their own story and they are combining it with a kind of a timeline, and each kind of a square in the timeline helps to tell one element or one important event from their own life. So how do we adapt that? You present the conflict, as I mentioned before, using a horizontal sequence chart and a timeline showing events. And you may use a Venn diagram, good witch of the north with the wicked witch of the west. And comparing Boo Radley with Bob Ewell, and I apologize for the typo there, it should be Bob Ewell. And you may use a drama presentation, and you may program the script into an AT device. And you use the writing process, either the templates. And this is, for example, a horizontal sequence chart that you can use in reading. You can use it in math activities. You can use it certainly with your teaching of social studies or history, for multiple, for a biography. But you can certainly use it, for example, in the Yellow Brick Road. What are some obstacles that Dorothy came across and her friends came across? And you can combine it with photographs or pictures, or definitely combination of objects and photographs. And finally, as we bring this whole thing to a close, I do want to emphasize that we have to make sure our instruction is systematic. In the beginning stages, we are going to find that we have to use prompting techniques. But when we use prompting techniques, we have to distinguish between those prompts where we have completely prompted the task for the student to complete to those that are not prompted. So in other words, if there was an error and you prompted the student, that is a prompted response. So you want to make sure you are progressing to a state where the student is not making errors, and you have to make sure you note when the prompt resulted. The prompt is because the student made an error. Then you have to make sure that your targeted learning objective, identifying the characters, identifying the setting, is easily identifiable in your learning activity. and your complex tasks are adjusted and broken down. Instead of, you provide the student with a sequence timeline. You provide the student with limited choices. You provide the student with just a single distractor. And you make sure you use age-appropriate activities and age-neutral materials, not using alphabet at the high school level. And then you make sure you're monitoring progress and you are modifying the strategies as needed and go back and reteach. And there are a number of resources that are mentioned in the next few slides. And as I said, one of the books is that Serving Students with Severe and Multiple Disabilities, and you will find that it is packed with tools and resources. And these are some other books on the autism spectrum, and also training for paraeducator. One thing I do want to mention here, it's very, very important that teachers who are serving students with severe and multiple disabilities also train your paraeducators so that they are constantly aware of when it is an prompted response and when it is not a prompted response, when it is a hand-over-hand prompting, and when it is a student engagement versus the paraeducator taking the hand of the student and pointing to the answer. So it's because when the student is able to independently respond is when we are getting errorless response. And there are some other resources that are mentioned here. And one of the things that I do want to mention here is AbleNet's product called the MeWo to Vivo. It's a complete collection. It's a literacy and a communication curriculum for students with significant needs. And it's a very helpful resource. And the other couple of things that I want to mention here. As I mentioned before, the Wizard of Oz, a simpler version, is available on the Kids Inco website. And the Giving Tree, by the way, there is a YouTube video that's available. And the UDL website, the Universal Design for Learning website, that link is also provided there. And one thing that I do want to mention here, the next webinar is focusing on the math magic. Although it is math magic, for students with significant needs, all of these activities, the science stimulation activities, the math magic activities, all of them are to increase their engagement. It is to create your environment a vibrant learning environment, and through math and through science, you are also expanding their vocabulary, their comprehension level, and you are creating an instruction that's very highly invigorative. And I look forward to meeting you at the next webinar. Again, I want to close with thanking AbleNet for making this webinar possible, and I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in this webinar. Now I will go to chat questions, and I will answer those questions. The book that I mentioned called Serving Students with Severe and Multiple Disabilities, which is a very comprehensive guide. It's available from LRP Publications. And LRP Publications, most school districts in this country have them as a vendor because many, many special ed directors order books from them. So your district should have access to these, access to this vendor. As I said, it's called Serving Students with Severe and Multiple Disabilities, a Guide to Strategies for Successful Learning. It's a new edition that has come out. It's completely packed with ideas. The other thing that I mentioned is the AbleNet's MeWo to Vivo. That's kind of completely different. That's much more literacy, whereas the other one, the serving students, it has more for all the content areas as well as the life skills area. I appreciate the next comment. It says, I wish you were my teacher, great ideas. You are teaching me every day, every time. When I go into classrooms and I observe the students and the teachers, you are my great teachers. Everything I have learned, I owe it to my experiences in the classrooms and my interactions with teachers and all the research that's going on. How do we deal with the fact that this all takes time to create, and in some cases there is no one available who can do these adaptations, or the school district isn't willing to be able to pay someone? It's a very, very good question, but what I would suggest is, instead of making 300 different stories, let's say stick to, let us say, half a dozen stories. And you use different materials to go with those stories. Use a PowerPoint presentation and repeat that PowerPoint presentation. Print those PowerPoint presentations into slide pages and then laminate it and use that story. Attach objects. And as I said before, for the word wall, go outside, bring some materials, and then you post it on there. Involve your students in creating that word wall. Involve your student in creating some of those response participation cards. And make a request at your school saying, these are students who need a lot of individualized support. And from my experience, a lot of the school districts do have at least one or two paraeducators who are assigned, and this is where your paraeducator plan can play a critical role in helping you in creating the materials. Okay, there is a question there about, could you please speak to the concepts of access to literacy strategies for decoding and sound blending and traditional literacy instruction for complex communication needs as addressed in the Light McNaughton Literacy Project through PSU. Yes, my strategies do target whole language learning, and because first of all, I have to admit I am not quite familiar with this McNaughton Literacy Project through PSU. One of the things that I would suggest, especially for students with severe and multiple disabilities, I am assuming you're thinking of students with severe and multiple disabilities, the blending may be somewhat difficult. One of the tools that I suggest is, for example, have a vertical ABC chart and then use a graphic organizer and put in inside that graphic organizer in the central box IN, and then they make up words. Pull out from that letter chart, the vertical letter chart on the left side, pin and tin and win, and make up those words by moving the alphabet. Some of these techniques that I'm saying is in my book. And the other thing that I want to mention, decoding, yes, you can try, but decoding may be somewhat difficult if the student is functioning either at the beginning symbolic or the early symbolic level. So you may have to present it more as a whole word approach, but you can certainly try the other technique that I suggested. I hope I am answering your questions to the best of my ability. The other question is, do you think it is best to go with low technology presentation before moving to technology? Absolutely. You certainly want to begin with low technology, but low technology can mean like the response participation course, as well as some of the AbleNet tools like I Talk to a Communicator, the Talking Bricks Communicator, the Super Talker, as well as the Quick Talker, and then you can cover up those icon spaces, with just blank space, and then begin with 4 or 5 vocabulary, gradually increase it. The next question is, do you think it is best to go with, that's the one that I just added, and then as the student gains confidence and strength and is able to use it more successfully and gains facility with using it, then you can gradually move. Begin with, for example, choice-making tool. Begin with I Talk to a Communicator. Then move on to Super Talker, or try both and see, gradually switch it to Super Talker, Quick Talker, and then to a multiple icon device. The other question is, like the foam character used on the organizer, where is a good place to get these? Or do I need? No, you do not have to make them. Many of these things, I actually happen to buy them at my course, or you can get them, I think, from Oriental Trading Company, and from my course, for teacher discount you get, and sometimes they have a theme-based things. And I know, for example, Oriental Trading Company and many school districts have Oriental Trading Company as their vendor, one of the vendors. And by the way, in the, for example, those the pigs and the spiders, you can get them also from Oriental Trading Company in the size variations. So next time when we talk about math, you can talk about from big to small using these things. And you really don't, you can just put Velcro on it, and you can even get your students, if you have a combination of students who are somewhat life skills program and who have moderate to severe disabilities, and also students with most severe disabilities, and they can help you also as they are putting together some of these things. It increases their concept understanding. They can help you also create these materials. Where is a good place? The last question is, how do you suggest working on literacy, how frequently? Yes, literacy is an everyday thing, all through the day, as much as possible, everywhere that you are. Because literacy is strengthened when you can apply it and generalize it and practice it in a variety of settings. That's why I suggested when you go outside for recess, that's when you take your pictures of the tree and the leaves and they match it to that. Then when you are talking about food and the related vocabulary in the classroom, they make a choice on what they're going to have for lunch, and then they use that when they go into the cafeteria, and then they use it if you have a vending machine, they use it when you're going on a CBI trip. So it goes on all day long, everywhere. The literacy is something that's pervasive throughout the environment and all day long. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye. And I thank again AbleNet for this webinar.